All right, everybody. Hello, my name is Caden Owens, and today we are going to be looking at my analysis of the Microsoft Corporation through the lens of organizational behavior. So let's not waste any time and let's get started. So first off, let's start with a brief history of Microsoft. So Microsoft was founded in 1975 by both Bill Gates and Paul Allen. So most people know about Bill Gates, very famous businessman. Not a lot of people know about Paul Allen. Yeah, Paul Allen was the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates. They worked on it together. The name Microsoft comes from the word microprocessor and software combined. So it really just kind of spells out what the company does. It produces software. And Paul Allen was kind of the main programmer that came into the company with Bill Gates. So they worked together. Unfortunately, Paul ended up getting quite ill in the late 70s and passed away, which is why most people don't know about him, because when Microsoft really took off, he wasn't really around. So Bill Gates kind of got most of the credit. But yeah, Microsoft is one of the world's largest software developers, and that can be seen during its first real takeoff period, which was in 1980, with the release of the first Windows operating system. So Windows is obviously the big question is, are you a Windows person or an Apple person? So Windows or iOS, you only got two options, and Windows is predominantly used in businesses now and has been for a while. So as business students, we use a lot of Windows products. You're very familiar with stuff like Excel and Word and PowerPoint. I'm ironically not using PowerPoint when I'm talking about Microsoft, but PowerPoint is usually what we all use. And Bill Gates was also, fun fact, world's youngest billionaire ever at age 31, which is just weird to think about. But yeah, so just a little bit of background info on Microsoft. So how successful is Microsoft? Well, 1.5 billion people use the Windows operating system worldwide. That is not the most recent Windows, that is just Windows in general, so all forms. And it's the fourth most valuable company in the world. It's currently worth $2,181.67 billion, which is just a number that breaks my brain in so many ways. Microsoft doesn't just create software, they also create some hardware, namely like their series of video game consoles, Xbox. They do also create a lot of software. Their most recent software that I think is worth noting would be Microsoft Teams, and that was created because of the pandemic to allow a lot of businesses to continue working on their projects during some of the trying times and the just trying to keep us all connected and working throughout all that, which is really cool because that is a really effective way to be able to do a lot of those projects and team stuff. So let's go ahead and move right into the meat and potatoes of it all. So we're going to be focusing on a couple OB topics today, namely leadership, team development, and the overall culture of Microsoft. So you're going to see as we talk about this, but leadership is the big one that's kind of overarching all of it. And I'll explain why that is in a little bit, but I think it's really interesting seeing how Microsoft has developed in the last couple of years because it's been a ride. So first off, let's talk about leadership. So we're not going to be talking about Bill Gates. We're going to be talking about, I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize. Satya Nadella. And the reason we're going to be talking about Mr. Nadella here is because he's arguably the most influential CEO that Microsoft has ever had. And I say that, and I'm pretty confident saying that because when he came in 2014, he completely revamped the entire company, completely flipped everything on its head. And it's been very successful because of that. Since becoming CEO in 2014, he's been able to rise the company's value by $250 billion. So quite a substantial figure right there. And you might be asking yourself, well, what did he actually do? What makes him so special? Why is he such an important figure in this topic? Well, his guiding hand is going to be seen throughout the entire presentation today as we look at some other topics, because he really is the driving force behind a lot of the changes we see from 2014 up to current day, and he's still implementing changes today. And Nadella is really often credited for being like this amazing servant leader and this very transformational leader. And I think it's very deserved. He describes his leadership style as being a very, he describes it as a positive leadership style. And he has a heavy emphasis on promoting a growth mindset and promoting diversity in the workplace. Now, interestingly enough, when I think of someone who's a servant leader and someone who is very transformational, I tend to think of a more delegative style of leadership. Nadella is not that. He's actually more autocratic. And I think a lot of the reason why is because when he did come in, he completely shifted the focus of the company. He made very clear decisions. He's like, we're going to focus on cloud. We're going to focus on mobile. We're going to ignore Windows for a bit. We're not going to focus on our operating system. We're going to make some changes on our priorities, and we're going to completely flip the way we organize the corporation itself. And clearly, like I said, it paid off. So yeah, Nadella is going to, you're going to hear me say his name a lot because most of the decisions made in why things are the way they are currently is because of Nadella. So let's go ahead and move away from leadership for a bit and talk about culture. So like I said, Nadella really promotes a growth mindset. Not only that, though, he promotes high levels of accountability and a really high energy. He really wants people coming in and being excited about being in the workplace. And when I say accountability, I think accountability kind of sounds a little punitive. And the way he's presenting it, it's not actually very punitive. He means accountability in the way of he's making sure each of his employees understands the effect that their job has on the company as a whole. So he's just making sure they understand just how important and how impactful they are to the corporation, which I actually think is a really good thing because I think it promotes motivation. I think it promotes job, I think it has a good correlation with job performance. And I think in general, it promotes a higher level of job satisfaction because you are aware of just how impactful your role is in the corporation, and it creates a sense of unity throughout the corporation as a whole. So I think it's a really good thing. Now, like I said, the company is really interested in increasing diversity in order to increase innovation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that once we start talking about teams. But since taking over the company, women's role in the corporation has increased by 26%. As of this year, it's at 26.8%. Last year, it was 1% lower. So it's been incrementally increasing since he's taken over. And for the first time this year, they actually were able to have a disability statistic, which means we now know about how many people in the corporation identify as having a disability, which currently is about 6%. So he really values having all these different outlooks on life in order to try to increase innovation and to breed new and interesting ideas for the company. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on. So let's talk about teams. So I've said several times, Nadella has completely restructured the company after he took over. It's even more so with teams and more physically. You can very easily see it with teams. Over 7,000 positions were cut when Nadella took over. And that sounds really bad, right? Like 7,000 jobs just cut. But actually, when you look at it from the organization's perspective, it's actually kind of a really good thing. Because what it allows for, it cuts a lot of that fat away that wasn't helpful for the new vision. Not only that, but it allows you to create these smaller, more diverse, and more focused teams. So that's really helping them breed this innovation and this creativity. And I think it's really good for the company as a whole because it leans more into their new values and their culture. So we have several different types of teams that you can see within Microsoft. I think the two most important and most obvious are going to be your project teams and your work teams. Now, when I say project teams, I'm thinking software development. So you have a team that's working on a specific piece of software. Let's say they're working on Microsoft 365. Okay, so I'm working on Microsoft 365 And they're obviously comprehensively interdependent because they're sharing all this information. They're all working together in order to produce the product. And that's how you have to do software. You have to share that information. You're all working on sometimes the same bit, sometimes different bit. So it's a very intertwined kind of team style. You can't really work on your own thing too much because you have to be very clear with how you're communicating with your other team members in order to be able to get a functioning product. Now, work teams come in kind of two different forms. You have your senior leadership, which is going to be more sequentially interdependent because you have to follow the chain of command. And like I said, Nadella is very autocratic in his leadership style, so he does call the shots at the end of the day. And then you have your retail teams, which are also work teams, although they're more pooled and interdependent because they all do kind of do their own thing, but they all serve the same goal, which is sell product. So we see very different types, but obviously since they're work teams, they're both permanent fixtures. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, that's kind of teams in a nutshell. So let's talk about weaknesses. Overall, I think Microsoft is really, really strong. I don't see a whole lot of need for a whole lot of messing with what they got going on because it's working really well for them. If I were to suggest some changes, though, I would potentially look into reducing worker stress a bit. I didn't see a whole lot about improving worker stress. And since a lot of their mission right now is promoting empathy and really trying to look out for their employees, and that can be really seen in like Nadella released this very cool message to his employees during COVID, basically saying, hey, we're going to look out for you. We're going to make sure everyone's getting paid fully, regardless of how much you're working, because I know right now it's really stressful and we don't know what's going on. So like they do really promote that empathy, but it was still a very stressful situation. And I think just making sure that you have people who can swap from team to team to help pick up the slack if needed would probably go a really long way, and making sure your managers are really checking in and making sure they have the resources and the time to make sure they're getting done by the deadlines. I think that would be a really big help. I also think moving towards a more goal setting focus is going to be really good because again, that kind of backs up their growth mindset philosophy, making sure maybe like just having periodic goals where you sit down, your manager says, hey, let's set a goal for the period. Doesn't have to be like super big, but just something. Because I think that promotes not only the growth mindset, but I think it also just would improve motivation. And I think it would just get everyone more invested in their jobs and increase job satisfaction as a whole. Lastly, I think now that Nadella's really kind of gotten comfortable in the seat of CEO, he should start to pull back away from that autocratic style of leadership and move towards a more delegative style. And the reason I think this is because I think by doing that, he is going to be more in line with that more servant leadership, putting employees first, and more, I guess, how can I say this? That more growth mindset oriented culture. Because by moving to a more delegative spot, he's going to be able to provide his employees with more chances to grow, is my thought process behind that. I think the autocratic style works really well, so I wouldn't be shocked if he just keeps it because, again, he does do a very good job. So why fix what's not broken? So they're just suggestions. But overall, I do have to say, I think Microsoft's been really, really strong. I can't wait to see what they do in the near future because I do think we're going to continue to see these really great positive changes from them in the near future. And I kept talking about Nadella, but he really, like I said, he was a guiding hand throughout this whole thing. Like you can't go through Microsoft in the last 7 years without talking about him because he's had such a drastic impact on the corporation as a whole. So I'm really excited to see what he does next and what new and interesting ideas he brings to the industry as a whole, because he really is shaking up how we think we can lead and how we can run these organizations. So I think that's really cool. That's really all I got. So thank you guys for watching and sticking with me. Hopefully you found it a little interesting. I don't know if we're doing a question answer thing, but if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message and I will respond if you're interested in hearing any of the extra little information I gathered. So thank you all very much. Goodbye.